Welcome back to Half Past Capitalism, where we talk about alternatives to capitalism as if they were possible. This show is part of the Harbinger Media Network. Our guests today are Doctors Carmen Marcuello and Anjel Errasti. They are solidarity economy researchers based in Spain and the authors of some very interesting research on the Mondragon network of cooperatives. Carmen is a professor of business management at the University of Zaragoza, and Anjel is a professor at the Institute of Cooperative Law and Social Economy at the University of the Basque Country. Welcome to both of you.
Welcome, Drew. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you for your invitation. Thank you very much.
So by way of introduction, Mondragon, from my understanding, is a massive network of cooperatives that covers about 75,000 workers and 270 cooperatives or organizations. Mondragon cooperatives include banks, educational institutions, research, manufacturing, and other industries. And the industrial division alone has 68 different cooperatives and 140 subsidiaries. I'm reading here from effectively Carmen and Anjel's paper. The core of what makes Mondragon fascinating, from my perspective anyway, is that all those cooperatives are, formally speaking, owned and democratically managed by the workers. So this basic fact really this sort of trickles down, it transforms every aspect of the enterprise, as far as I can see. And life in a Mondragon cooperative looks very different than really anything like a transnational corporation of similar size. So before we get into your sort of specific research on Mondragon, I was wondering if you have anything you would add to that sort of characterization overall of the Mondragon cooperatives.
Carmen.
Anjel, would you like to start?
Okay. No, I think it's a good introduction. Just to remark that Mondragon is not one company, no? Mondragon is a federation of independent cooperatives. It's a complex of cooperatives. And as you have said, there are industrial, consumer, banking, educational, research and development cooperatives, and all of them are worker-owned and, in a way, worker-managed. No, there are maybe bigger cooperatives in the world than Mondragon in the consumer and banking sector, or agricultural or energy, but a group of cooperatives working together, link with the community, and with this development in self-management or economic democracy, it's not easy to find.
Indeed. And can we just characterize, maybe just very briefly, what the sort of coordinating layer looks like? What is the structure that brings all of these different cooperatives together and makes it possible for them to work together?
What is the structure? Okay, this coordination system has been changing in time. No, Mondragon's cooperatives were founded in the 50s, 1956, and at the beginning it was the bank. They were structured around the bank and around the regional valleys. No, nowadays there is they call the Mondragon Corporation, which is not a corporation really. It's central services made of 60, 70 people, coordinating all the system. But we have to say it again, every cooperative is autonomous. Every cooperative takes its own decisions. And then they have this coordination system with the Mondragon Congress, which meets almost every year, with the Mondragon or the General Council, which is a kind of top management of the corporation. And they have all these also solidarity mechanism, no, to help cooperatives each other, no, with they put also money, they pull money to do projects together. So it's also, they have been developing this coordination mechanism during the last 60, 70 years, and it's getting more complex and rich.
Anjel said is a very interesting thing. It's experience very old, more around 70 years old. So during this time, there are many kind of different moments and evolution of the, as you say, coordination structure and so on. But for me, there are two main things. It's a cooperative that start with people for the people, and also it's an experience of economic democracy. How we can develop a project, even in my opinion, I'm not sure. In my opinion, it's a life project, because you have education from the little child until the university. You can be in the University of Mondragon, and you can receive the finance service. You can receive the consumer service. You can receive from this project. It's a whole project. It's not only an industrial cooperative, because it's the traditional imagine of corporate Mondragon is an industrial cooperative. Of course, there are very big industrial cooperatives, but also there are all the service that the people need to have a good life.
So what I just want to jump into your research a little bit. You both followed sort of the sort of whole life of one of the Mondragon cooperatives, Electrodomésticos. And I guess I just wanted to start with the sort of end of that cooperative's life. Maybe you could say what the cooperative was and what it did, but I want to talk about so what happens when a cooperative goes out of business for whatever reason within the Mondragon network? What happens to the workers? What happens to the factories? How does that process unfold?
I mean, you need some context, no, to talk about these things, and we have to say, well, no, let's say, beginning also from the ending, no, as you say, that was an exception. Mondragon Cooperative has an extraordinary rate of growth and survival, but it's not 100%. There are exceptions, and the exceptions in this case it was Fagor Electrodomésticos, and Fagor Electrodomésticos it wasn't any cooperative. It was the largest cooperative, the largest industrial cooperative of Mondragon. No, in the good times of Fagor Electrodomésticos there were like 10,000 people working in this cooperative, almost 5,000 members. In the time of the closing, in the bankruptcy, in 2013, at this time it was a smaller cooperative, because during the last year it was in crisis, and there were also downsides in the cooperative or the factory. No, what happened at the very end? But the very end, the company, for many reasons, economical, external, internal, it was the crisis, 2008 crisis. No, that was and as many other companies and as many other competitors, it failed. What happened then for workers? But I have to make the distinctions. Probably some of the subsidiaries were bought by competitors. So the workers continued to work in these subsidiaries. The subsidiaries in Poland and in France, they were bought by competitors. So the workers, maybe it was also, maybe some subsidiaries, they closed, the subsidiary in China or Morocco. And in the Basque country, most of the workers were worker members, and they lost their job, they lost their savings, but they didn't go unemployed. No, they were relocated in other cooperatives. There were a strong solidarity effort by Mondragon, and the workers of the pilot cooperative went to work to other cooperatives in the surrounding areas. That was basically. Some of them also continued working in the remaining factory of Fagor Electrodomésticos, but the main idea was the solidarity mechanism with early retirement and relocation of workers. But we are talking about relocation of more than 1,000 workers relocated in other cooperatives, which is extraordinary. Extraordinary rescue operation of workers.
And Carmen, I just wanted to ask how did the workers sort of respond to this, or what's their sort of view of it, or what are the different views that you hear from workers?
As Anjel said, it was an extraordinary moment in Mondragon Corporation. It's the first time that's something like a emblematic cooperative failed. But failed after many extraordinary problems. We have to remember this 2008. 2008 started a big crisis with consequences really big, only for other companies, not for the cooperatives especially, for all the kind of companies. As you said, as said Angel, there were incredible solidarity mechanism for rescue especially the company at the beginning, and when they decided we cannot do more, there were an incredible solidarity mechanism for rescue the workers and the worker members. But of course, it's a complex situation. Of course, there are people that don't understand that happened in this moment because they lost the job, they lost the savings. So it was really hard. But of course, they are, in my opinion, the more important, the most amount of people, they are very grateful about the effort of the rest of the cooperatives in order to rescue the jobs and start again, start in a new process.
So was there a difference between the treatment of the workers in the sort of the Mondragon core, shall we say, in Basque country, in Spain, and the ones in Poland or other places? What would you say that there was a difference in terms of the amount of solidarity?
Of course, this is, in Mondragon, there is a network of cooperatives that can help the workers. No, if you are working in one town and in this cooperative, you can go to work to another cooperative which is in the same town or 10 kilometers away or maybe 50 kilometers away. But in this, but you don't have that in Poland or in Morocco or in China. There is, you don't have this support or surrounding businesses that will help you in case of necessity. So, and this is in Mondragon. This idea of relocation has been developed also during this idea of these practices has been developed during many years. No, in the research for example, in the crisis of 1973, what was a huge crisis in the Basque country. Also, it was extraordinary because in the Mondragon system, any cooperative, any job was lost, no, because of this solidarity mechanism, which has been developed over the years.
And so, I think that sort of brings us to what I find fascinating about your research, which is the sort of attempt by Mondragon to expand overseas and not just to expand its operations, but to bring its cooperative culture as well. And obviously, Mondragon is the product of a very unique history. You have the Basque region and the people who have are very linguistically distinct, but also culturally distinct. There seems to be a strong culture of solidarity and a specific sort of political relationship to the rest of Spain, which is all these things, from my understanding, have enabled Mondragon to become what it is. And so it's very hard to replicate. And I think a lot of people go to Mondragon and say, oh, wow, this is amazing. Let's do this in Canada or whatever. But then you run into the situation where it's like, okay, it's a very specific relation to like the Franco regime and all these very specific histories that sort of stack up to make it possible. But I guess I just wanted to focus on specifically the efforts to create cooperatives in other places, whether it's Poland or Brazil or China. Can you talk a bit about what those efforts have looked like and have they worked?
Carmen.
Yeah, for me there are two different questions in your question. One is about the environment that, as you say, the Mondragon has at the beginning and during these years. We can find this kind of environments. We can say maybe cooperative environment in other parts of the world. For example, Emilia-Romagna in Italy is an example. Many people around the world study the phenomenon of Emilia-Romagna. Also, for example, Antioquia in Colombia. There are environments around the cooperatives that create this situation in which the people feel like cooperative companies are the normal solution for any kind of activities, economics activity, right? And for me, the second question is the special experience of Mondragon, because it's true, it's a phenomenon, very important phenomenon for Spain and also internationally, but they cannot reply in in the process of the internationalization of Mondragon, it's true they cannot reply in other places. But in my opinion, they are also amazing experience for other cooperatives around the world. For example, they are a publication of between International Cooperative Alliance and Eurixe. They publish from 10 years right now a special report about the 300 cooperatives, the biggest 300 cooperatives in the world. And we can find cooperatives even bigger than Mondragon. My point is the phenomenon of cooperatives is around the world in a small size and a bigger size. But maybe there are few experience or few information or few interest in some way to know what's happening in this area. So for me, there are two main things. The idea of the big companies, because they are, and Mondragon is one very, very special sample, and also there are cooperatives environments.
And what about Mondragon's efforts to expand abroad? Have those been effective?
I mean, as you said before, not everybody was expecting in the 20th century, in the 60s, 70s, to see more Mondragons all over the world and to change the economy. No, that was the alternative. That was the capitalism, communism, and we're expecting, okay, let's see the third way, the Yugoslavian way, the Mondragon way, that will change. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Yes, there have been some experiences inspired by Mondragon, but always in local and small, no? Small. But then in the years 2000, as you said, Mondragon went abroad. We have Mondragon went abroad, and we have these many subsidiaries by Mondragon. Nowadays, as you said in the introduction, there are like 140 subsidiaries belonging to the Mondragon companies. And they went abroad and mostly following the customers. They were competing in very global industries, competing with other multinationals, and they were almost obliged to get some size, scale, to compete with the others. And yes, they've been transferring some parts of the Mondragon model to these subsidiaries. Yes, they are producing the same products. They say almost producing in the same production method. They are using the Mondragon know-how. Some human resource management techniques could be cooperatives like teamwork, share information, wage, low wage scale, all these things are used. But the Mondragon model in itself, we don't see these subsidiaries abroad. They are not cooperatives. They are capitalist firms controlled by Mondragon. And I think this is the challenge of Mondragon, no? How to transfer the real Mondragon model, the successful Mondragon model, to these subsidiaries abroad. But for the moment, it didn't happen, in my opinion.
And you had a specific example of Brazil, where you actually do have a culture of cooperatives and so on, but there seems to be a tension, and there's a lot of support for a solidarity economy in Brazil, and there's institutions that can back that, but it seems like there's a willingness among the workers, but it didn't happen, and it seems like there's a tension between the sort of centralized control of the Mondragon company and the sort of cooperativization efforts that might happen on a local level. Can you speak a little bit to that tension and how you see that sort of playing out? Or
Yes, there is. I think the case of Brazil is very interesting because in Brazil, it happens. Let's say Mondragon has cooperativized local private companies. They were in the Basque country. There were cooperatives, and some of these cooperatives bought private companies, which were capitalistic companies, and in some years, 5, 10, 15 years, they have been transformed into cooperatives. For example, this company that has a subsidiary in Brazil, Favor Rederland, it has cooperativized many subsidiaries in the Basque country and in Navarre and another cooperative. This is in the local area with the legal instruments, with the institutional support and all these things. In Brazil, In Brazil, it's different. In Brazil, it's different. In Brazil, they did studied the possibility of transforming. It wasn't really an attempt. It was a study, a survey, and they didn't go ahead. They didn't go ahead. The excuse was said that there were cultural problems, institutional problems, but I think it's also there are other problems. I think it's also a little bit of still cooperatives, the Basque cooperatives, didn't go really through this way. No, they still want to control foreign subsidiaries, and I think this is the challenge. No, this is the challenge, which is for the moment delaying a little bit too much to do steps cooperativizing foreign subsidiaries.
So for people who are interested in international solidarity, building international solidarity on a sort of through the economy, through cooperative specifically or worker ownership, are there any lessons from this sort of specific example that you would draw out or sort of highlight?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. For the moment, we haven't seen cooperatives because the Mondragon case is not the only case. No, in Mondragon there are like 30 cooperatives that have subsidiaries all over the world. But in France also there are other cooperatives like AP or like Acome, which have also many subsidiaries all over the world. And there are also some Italian cooperatives that have subsidiaries all over the world. And all of them, they say that they are trying. Some of them, they have tried a little bit more than the others. But for the moment, we haven't seen these global cooperatives. We haven't seen this democratic multinational enterprise or this global cooperative. They talk about that. They talk about giving steps in that direction, but there are always some excuses, constraints, limitations. There is always a crisis, a pandemic, or something that is refraining to go in that direction. No? I think it's also a question of powers and politics. No, that and maybe you have to do more pressure in these internationalized cooperatives to encourage them to go in that direction.
Yeah. We always have a discussion about this with Anjel. Of course, these limitations are true. These limitations, as you say, institutional problems, cultural problems, regulation problems. Of course, there are these kind of problems. But if I go further, in my opinion, it's a miracle that the cooperatives exists, because most of the countries everything is ready for the capitalism forms. If you want to create a cooperative, in some places, like a miracle, because they say this is not a good option, this is inefficient. Even in the economics schools, like my schools in the university, explain that cooperatives are inefficient by theory, in theoretical, in the syllabus of the subject of the management. Okay, so the environment at this moment around the world is not really supporting cooperatives. Of course, there are incredible steps at this moment. For example, very recently the ILO, International Labour Organization, established a definition of social and solidarity economy for over the world, just in the last June. So there are very small steps recognizing the role and the contribution of the cooperatives to the world. Of course, and at the same time, as you say, Anjel, of course, there are problems inside of the cooperatives because the size is very difficult to maintain this economic democracy inside of these big structures. But in my opinion, also there are around problems that introduce more complexity to do this. They are, as you say, Mondragon is big, but there are other agriculture cooperatives, there are credit cooperatives, there are other kind of cooperatives that they try to solve this situation of how to develop the model cooperative in a global sense, in a global world. But if it's completely true, there are problems in the way that they solve, of course, it's true.
I guess that leads me, I think you've already sort of covered it a little bit, but so the sense that I get from what you're saying is that the workers, relative to like another multinational corporation, the workers who are working in a Mondragon subsidiary benefit from a variety of different kinds of solidarity in terms of the sort of pay scale, or the sort of the ratio, the maximum ratio of the sort of highest paid worker to the lowest paid worker, in terms of benefits, in terms of solidarity if there's layoffs or something like that. But that so far has stopped short of worker control or worker self-governance or worker ownership, which I guess are different things. But is that sort of an accurate portrayal of how Mondragon is expanding overseas?
In my opinion, no. In this case, in Mondragon, there is a dual system. We have a cooperative center, and we have a capitalist periphery.
Okay.
And how different is this capitalist periphery from other multinational subsidiaries? Might be a little bit different, no? I mean, it's the Mondragon, some teamwork, human resource management, but comparing with other subsidiaries or other multinationals working in the same sector, is, in my opinion, is not so different, no?
Okay.
Because with what will make the difference will be this in worker developing the economic democracy by profit sharing or employee ownership. And for the moment, we haven't seen that. We have seen, yes, we have maybe a little bit better conditions, but when we have an economic crisis, when we have to make workers redundant, they do as the other subsidiaries of multinationals, no? So there is this Mondragon for the moment, and this is for me the great challenge, no? And of Mondragon is to find a model, not necessarily cooperative, but a little bit closer to the cooperatives, and I think that they can do more than they are doing.
And what do the debates look like within Mondragon? I mean, I assume that because you have tens of thousands of workers, within this network of cooperatives, that they must have different ideas about how to act in solidarity with workers who are, under their ownership, I guess, overseas, or working in companies that are under their ownership. Is there a debate within Mondragon? Are there different parts of the cooperatives that are pushing for different things?
I think there might be some debate, but it's not public. They don't talk much about these things. They are very occupied in everyday businesses. The business, the pressures they have for the market are incredible. They are working very hard, competing with other companies. The 2008 crisis, pandemic, new digitalization, electrification, all these things, energetic problems, suppliers. So, I mean, in the Mondragon Congress in 2003, they said, no, let's find a way to make the subsidiaries closer to the Mondragon model. Let's improve participation, improve it, ownership and management. But then in the next 70 years, they didn't say much about this. They didn't advance much in this idea. Now in the last Congress, I think it was 2021 or 20, they said again, no, let's do something to get closer these subsidiaries to the Mondragon model. But there are no, and they say that sometimes that is not easy, that culturally is very difficult, that these workers sometimes they don't want. I think they could do more than they want. No, there are some real cooperators also that they are worried about this, and others maybe they are not so worried, but of not doing things in general, Mondragon is taking some advantage. But and it is this contradiction because it's all these Mondragon principles and all the Mondragon philosophy. And with no actions in the foreign subsidiaries, it's a little bit of tension and contradiction. So in a moment, they will have to confront this situation.
But as you say, there are debate. At least there is a debate inside. And I think there
is a concern, yes.
It's not only a debate of Mondragon, it's a general debate between the biggest cooperatives. How develop this model and how to solve these tensions and conflicts between, as you say, subsidiaries and the core of the cooperatives. For me, the question is, at least there is a debate, there are some kind of experience, and there are some programs that they are starting in other cooperatives, for example, but it's not a easy way. Yeah, in my opinion, of course, again, is we have to see the global picture. It's not only a question of the one cooperative decide to do this. It's a question of how the institutional situation around them support and push also to this in this way.
So I wanted to pick up on the idea of these sort of pressures, because I mean my understanding of cooperatives is that this is a sort of a kind of a fundamental problem with cooperatives, is that it's very hard to, like, once you become a business owner collectively, you sort of live all the like intense pressures of the market, of, you know, building your business, of you become very preoccupied with the logistics of building a business, and it's very hard to create space for a larger political vision or or meaningful participation even. And you specifically talk in one of your papers about the sort of life cycle of cooperatives and how management voices become more and more dominant over time because of those pressures. And so you end up with, you know, you start with maybe a much more participatory culture within a cooperative, and then over time it becomes more management centered and more sort of bureaucratic. Can you talk a bit about that in terms of in terms of your observations of Mondragon or other cooperatives, and are there any ways to stop that life cycle from happening, or is it just a natural thing?
Carmen.
First, it's very curious because in the last jury that I was about Mondragon Cooperative, one of the conclusions of this thesis, it was about this process of the degeneration and regeneration of in a cooperative. Is not a process that is linear. They are living sometimes at the same time, because, as you say, problems in the participation or problems in other kind of characteristics of the cooperative. So it's a continuum process. It's not a question that we have a cooperative and then disappear. No, it's a process that all the time is working about this, because it's normal, because it's from the beginning of the interview. Cooperatives are people that work for people. It's not a question of the capital working for capital. It's a people that work for people with people. So conflict is always a normal thing. So one of the very experienced people in management in cooperatives, they are the management of the cooperation and the management of the conflict. This is the way. So of course we can find this kind of characteristics, as you say, the degeneration and regeneration, and it depends also very, very, very much about the context, as I'm saying before. For example, in the case of Mondragon, when Mondragon was created in a context of after the Civil War. It was a context of even a third situation. Very poor people destroy everything. There are no education system. There are no health system. There are nothing. So Mondragon was the solution in this moment for the problem of the people in this moment. So, but now Mondragon lives during 70 years and appear many different kind of problems. So it's adapting all the time of this. As the same of the other cooperatives. For example, I visit other cooperatives, for example, in Mexico, really, really big cooperatives in housing, in industry, and other different kind of service. And we can find, of course, the same, very similar problems. But, of course, every cooperative has a specific situation, especially for the multinational cooperatives.
Yes, Mondragon have seen this evolution. No? At the beginning, it was Arizmendiarrieta, the priest, and it was this Christian solidarity, transforming the enterprise, very idealistic with the founding leaders, and it was from the 56 to the 70s, no? And then it became, that was this very idealistic in a situation of very need. Then it was the Mondragon model, no, with the Mondragon group. It was the Basque model also, 80s. Nowadays, Mondragon is another thing. No, we have these educated people in many of them graduated, working in cooperative headquarters, controlling subsidiaries, with very good wages and very good working conditions. So it has changed, no? But and I think, and again, no, the cooperative life in the Mondragon Center, it works quite well. The problem is in the subsidiaries when they have to go a little bit further, no? And the problem it will be also, how to adapt to these, I don't know, we're talking before about these new challenges of climate change or global competition inequalities, but in the Mondragon area, in the Basque country, is working quite well.
But as you say, it's in the Mondragon area. In the rest of the country, as you say, it's not the same. You say the core of the Basque country, the Mondragon area, is the influence of Mondragon cooperative is huge. As if we look on the rest of the country and we look on the other parts of the Spain, we don't find the same situation, the same conditions. So, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Drew, I interrupt you.
No, it's great. You talked about the non-linear sort of process of some, it's not a direct link where you start idealistic and then turn into a bureaucratic management sort of thing. It's there's always a process happening. Are there any sort of specific examples that you could point to about Mondragon or within Mondragon or other cooperatives that you've talked about where there's been a sort of a drift toward management and then a reversal of that process and sort of how it happened? I mean, I noticed, I think there was one example, and this might not apply, but it was like there was actually a decrease in the ratio of the lowest wage to the highest wage. So you actually had a reversal of the trend of like a constant lengthening difference between the highest and lowest wages. Would that be an example of a sort of reversal, or are there any others that you could point to that would be of interest?
I mean, talking about wages, for example, it is true. No, at the beginning it was 1 to 3. 1 was the top manager, and 3 was the top manager, and 1 as the bottom worker. No, and it was 1 to 4.5, 1 to 6, 1 to 9, 1 to 12, exceptionally with the top of the Mondragon, and as most of the people is 1 to 5. No, but of the companies. But there is a few people who is earning only 1. No, most of the workers have some seniority and qualification and extras. But for example, in the case when Favor Electrodomésticos was having this problem, all the workers of the Mondragon Valley, which is called, there are many cooperatives, Favor, Ederland, Favor Automation, Mondragon Assembly, Favor Industrial, Favor Electrónica, etc. All the workers decided to reduce their wage to help the workers of Favor Electrodomésticos. I mean, there is the wage gap has been increasing, but when there is the need, the workers decide we are going to earn less, 10% less, which is a lot, to help or 5% less, to help the workers of a cooperative which is having problems. And at the end, it didn't work, but they lost their money. And that was an example of, regeneration or solidarity or intercooperation action. No?
That's a remarkable example. Can you describe a little bit what the organizing? I mean, there must have been people really. I mean, I can't imagine that people just spontaneously decided to reduce their wages by 10%, there must have been people must have really been pushing for that as one of the solutions to express their solidarity. But can you talk a little bit about the process, how that decision came about?
Well, I wasn't there. No, I am a researcher from outside. No, but I was following and speaking with friends and with working members. No, and that was when Fagor. Nobody wanted Fagor Electrodoméstico closing. No, everybody was trying to help. The crisis is going to be over. They need some cash now. The corporation was giving money. The Basque government was giving money. Lagunaro was giving money. Everybody was giving money. And the workers in a certain moment, because I have to say, there are still these some cooperatives in the Mondragon Valley. They share profits, no? They pool profits. A part of the profits, let's say, I don't know how much is it. It might be 10-15%. They put in common, and then they do they distribute again, no? So if a cooperative has had losses, with pooling profits, might have some profits at the end, no? This is helping each other, and these are some mechanisms that are established institutionally and not working. Sorry.
And Carmen, so an argument that I've heard, and only sort of in large strokes, but is sort of a comparison or a contrast between the Mondragon model of trying to become internationally competitive, which is to expand overseas and sort of create global supply chains and maybe be able to access lower wages basically in order to maintain competitiveness internationally. But then you have, I think some people have contrasted that with the Emilia-Romagna model where it's more of a regional intensification. Do you think there's anything to this comparison? And I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on that.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand everything, but when I say these examples of Emilia or Antioquia or other territories, for me it's the same like Basque Country. It's the same, very similarities. And if we talk about how and why Mondragon decided to the process of internationalization, is because they want to keep the employ of the people of the valley. They don't go away, they don't go abroad because they want to take the production from Mondragon Valley to other part of the world. The traditional process of internationalization of a company is they usually translate the production of one place to other place because it's cheaper and the wages are lower and the tax conditions are lower and so on. But when in this process of internationalization, the reason usually the common reason is to keep the jobs in the place, not to take out the jobs to other part of the world. In this way, they start a dual process to create a new projects or even buy other companies and so on, in order to maintain the conditions of the original company. If you look at other companies, other multinational companies, they sometimes even they compete between them in order to decrease the salaries of the people inside of the same company. They put the different subsidiaries to compete between each others in this way to decrease even the salaries between the workers. In my opinion, this is not the process of most of the cooperatives that we know, and it's a different way to understand how we can develop a cooperative model in this crazy world. We are living in a world that is increased the inequalities and increasing the environmental problems. How we can solve this kind of problems? Maybe there are some solutions, and maybe we can look a little bit more about cooperatives.
Yeah, so I think that's a crucial distinction between offshoring in terms of like closing a factory in Europe or in the US and then moving that whole thing to a place with lower labor standards. But instead you have, in order to maintain those factories, you expand overseas increase competitiveness. I guess I'm now sorry. I'm remembering the argument a little better, which I think was that Mondragon is trying to compete in international markets, which on when you're trying to sell a dishwasher or something at the same price as like a multinational that has a big factory in China, then obviously it's very difficult to do that when your factories are all in Basque country, and which has a higher wages and standard of living and everything. But I think the contrast was with like Emilia Romagna, which this person seemed to imply anyway was more sort of focused on regional markets and was able to access more sort of solidarity in terms of maintaining a slightly better pricing structure, so that they're not forced into this international market where they're having to push wages down. But does that ring any bells, or does that make sense to you?
I mean, in that case, I knew cases from Emilia Romagna that they have been also transformed into multinational. SACNI, TEFLA, they are in the top 10 of workers' cooperatives, and in these cases, the workers' member ratio, non-worker member ratio are terribly worse than in the case of Mondragon, no?
Okay.
And in Mondragon, in this case, in ratios of member, non-members, is not doing very well, but others are doing worse still in this case. And it depends very much of the product, of the trajectory of the firms. I mean, it's in these cases like Mondragon cases, no? If you are an automotive supplier, or you change your business and you close the factory and you try to find other kind of business, or you become a global supplier. There are no options. And in the case of Mondragon, they have decided to be global suppliers, no? It's the case of Cooperative, for example, no? Cooperative was doing, Fragor was doing gas regulators for Fragor Electrodomésticos. And they started exporting gas regulators for barbecues in the United States. But the United States companies went to Mexico and they asked Cooperative to go to Mexico with them. So they went to Mexico to do gas regulators for the barbecues. But then the companies went to China, so they have to go to China to do gas regulators to these kind of things. And then they went back to the United States. Then you have to go back to the United States. You are following them. So you can decide not to do that. Let's do that. Let's do this kind of jobs let's give this kind of jobs, this part of the economy to multinational, to private companies. I don't agree. I think that they should keep doing as much product as possible. And also they should be as large as possible, but always maintaining as much as possible the cooperative spirits or principles and spreading them all over the world. Not necessarily at the first of the process, but yes, have this idea of improving things.
And I'm curious about I think Mondragon has some subsidiaries in China as well. Is that right?
Yes, many.
And I'm just curious, just given the sort of political situation there, or regulatory sort of framework, which is obviously, I would imagine, quite different. Is there a difference between, for example, Mondragon subsidiaries in Brazil and Mondragon subsidiaries in China, in terms of all the different measures that you are using in terms of pay equity and solidarity and workplace participation and all that stuff?
Oh, no, it's difficult. It's different. No, I mean, probably Brazil culturally is closer to the Basque country, no, and speaking Portuguese, speaking Spanish, it's not so different. And maybe in Brazil, cooperatives are more spread than in China, or, well, that depends on the town, in the city, in Brazil also, no? And in China also, you have all these, the problem is that all these subsidiaries, sometimes they are in big cities like Sao Paulo, Shanghai, Guadalajara, and in these capitalist metropolis, no, 15 million, 20 million people working very hard. And in these companies, sometimes there are huge turnover of workers, no? And these workers, and in the case in China, where they are demanding overtime, no, they are there to workers coming from the countryside going to these capitalist factory metropolis, and what do they want to do is to earn as much money as possible. So for the cooperative, this is a huge problem because they go to the, how do you say, to the mouth of the wolf. You are in the capitalist hell, no, and it's very difficult to get out clean from this situation.
Yeah, so I think we're getting close to the end here, but I guess I'd love to hear your sort of, you know, Anjel, you seem to be saying that you know, international, that cooperatives should, you think that the best sort of way forward is for cooperatives to expand as large as possible, but to make greater efforts to expand cooperation as large as possible as well. Do you see any other sort of pathways to internationalizing cooperation? You know, is there a more sort of mutual version of this where the big cooperatives sort of help develop cooperatives on their own footing that are independent in the global south? Are there any models like that you would advocate, or do you think it's just a matter of continuing to grow the existing cooperatives and then spread cooperation that way?
No, I think that has, well, I think this idea, no, Schumacher, small is beautiful, but cooperative should remain small. Or cooperative should be bakeries, gift shops, and art. I don't know. I don't share with that idea. No, I think they should be as they should be all kind of cooperatives. It's good to have small cooperative, medium cooperative, and large cooperative. And we know that when we are getting larger, we might lose the or a genuinity of the cooperative. We might lose something in the way, and we can get into hybridization processes, or maybe in this new neo-cooperativism, and or we can become some kind of capitalist enterprises, not half cooperatives and half capitalist. But still, there are alternative organizations, but this is idea, no? They have to maintain this spirit of transformation of the economy. If there is also the risk, there is the risk of total degeneration. No? We become capitalist enterprises making profits for a few. That happen also. There is this risk. So, but there is a little bit the play field, and I think cooperatives should play in all the terrains, no, in the small, medium, large, and hyper large sizes.
I would like to remind that the cooperatives start in the 19th century, and they start in USA, in Spain, in France, in Mexico. So at the same time, in UK, start the first cooperatives, the recognized cooperatives, the pioneers of Rochdale, start at the same time in many parts of the world. So it was, I mean, a moment with no phones, no WhatsApp, no this kind of technological things that we have right now. It's still like a movement. It's not a question only about to have cooperatives or not. It's to have a spirit of cooperative, as say Anjel. Anjel say we need to maintain the challenge, to maintain the spirit of the transformation of the reality, to give the opportunity of the people to be happy or to have a good life. If we think this way, we need to create again this kind of cooperative movement, because I feel that we are living like a blind society at this moment, that think that we don't have problems. We are living in Canada, for example, as you. We are living in Spain. We have some kind of problems, but the rest of the world, they have big problems, and even the next generations. If we don't think that we have very incredible big problems about climate emergency and inequality problems around the world, we are living in another moment or historical moment. So at this moment, there are big challenges that we need to solve together again, as we learn in other historical moments. For me, as Angel said, we need small cooperatives, we need medium, large, and hyper large cooperatives to try to solve the problems that we are living together.
One last question is just like, for if you were speaking to a young person getting into cooperatives, and how would you, what advice would you give, or what suggestions would you make for somebody who wants to both expand cooperation, to be much bigger than it is, and to be a bigger part of the economy than it currently is, but also maintain those ideals, maintain those that deep sort of participation and democratic spirit that you were talking about. What would you say to somebody like that?
For me, there are two.
Yes, Carmen.
No,
you go.
Okay. If we are thinking about a young person that would like to start a cooperative project, the first step. I don't know in your country, but in the last years here in Spain, most of the political decision is to promote their self-employment, to have their own companies and the people create their own jobs. This is a crazy policy. It's a crazy policy because the individual entrepreneur is very fragile, is very vulnerable. If you create the conditions to collective entrepreneur, you are creating a stronger firm, strong projects, economics projects. However, there's a little problem. The collective entrepreneur needs skills to manage the cooperation, to manage the conflict, to manage that you are together with other people. I don't know in your area, but there are few experience of cooperation, even the school, even in our neighborhoods, very few experience of cooperation. So we need to support this kind of experience. This for the people that start. And when you say how to increase the size of your project, at the beginning we explained that Mondragon is a federation of cooperatives that they decide to work together. And they are independent, and they have their own decisions, and they decide to do something in common. For example, the benefits, they decide the 50% to pull together to share the risk and to share, to push another projects, to promote the cooperation, to promote other different kind of projects. In my opinion, this is an amazing way to understand that we can be small, we can maintain our project, we can be independent, but we can work in networks. For example, you, me, Angel, we can have our own project, but together we are stronger. And even if we collaborate with others, we could be stronger and stronger. But in this idea, networks, responsibility, because if you want to be independent, you want to cooperate with others, and you want to be in a federation, you have to be responsible too about your decisions, about how you contribute to the common good. So this model is, in my opinion, is very amazing in this moment, because you can work with people all over the world. It's not necessary to be together in the same place. At this moment, the cooperative platforms in the digitalization is a challenge that can be a new way to cooperation between people around the world. It's not necessary to be in the same place. We need to crash this frontiers. I don't know, is to crash the idea that we can collaborate with people in other parts. It's not necessary to be in the same place.
I mean, in my opinion, no. I mean, if you want to expand, grow, but it's to try to follow cooperative principles as much as possible. No, there are the principles are there, and they are very, very clear. And there are two principles, which is democratic decision or control, which is employee ownership, which is profit sharing, which is participation in management. All these things, no, if you are not giving participation in ownership to other people, you are excluding them. This is the first principle, or participation in ownership or profits. No, you are exploiting them in very clear sense. No. So that's, I mean, it's to follow as much as possible the cooperative principles. when it's possible, and if it's not possible now, later.
Thank you both so much for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to point people to in terms of either your writings or other readings about cooperatives or media that you think our listeners would be interested in?
No, I think we have been talking about the Mondragon, and there is a huge literature about Mondragon. There are many articles, many books, and if they are interested in the Mondragon, how it is international expansion, or in the Fagor bankruptcy, we have written, and they can find our articles in ResearchGate or in many other places. No? And if they want to contact us, also, they will be welcome.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Drew, for this invitation.
Carmen, did you want to add anything?
No, it's, we are, if there are people interested in this area, of course, we are available for them. Please, we can contact, and again, we grow together. And thank you very much for your invitation to this podcast.